Hello people, this is Elevate Voice TV, amplifying voices, inspiring the world. Today we are here for another episode of Foods and Nutrition, and it's me, your host, Orich is a promise, and today we are delighted to have a visitor with us, and I will allow him to introduce himself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Omara Jonathan. I'm so delightful to be hosted this program, Food and Nutrition.
Okay, thank you very much. And today we have a very interesting topic that many of us have seen or maybe heard about, and it's ultra processed foods. So, allow our visitor Jonathan to talk more about the classification of foods and what exactly ultra processed foods are.
Once again, good evening to our viewers. Today, we are going to talk about ultra processed foods, and I believe at some point we have seen them or we have heard about them. To go more into this, allow me start with the classifications of food, how we classify foods, food science. Basically, we use the NOVA classification technique. And in these classifications, we have group 1. And in group 1, we have the unprocessed foods. Basically, these are naturally made foods. They are whole foods, for example, an orange, bananas, matoke, mangoes, cassava. Basically, those are group 1. They are not processed. Group 2, we have the processed culinary ingredients. These are basically ingredients you find in your kitchen, for example, Royco, Harambe, etc. And group 3, we have the processed. Now, group 3, we are going to combine group 1 and group 2. Basically, these ones are you get group 1 and group 2 when you combine them. For example, you get your matoke from the garden. You get also your ingredients. Let us say that is the cooking oil, the Royco. You prepare your food basically to improve on its taste or to preserve it for some few hours. Those are the group 3. And the last group is the group 4. These are the ultra processed foods, where our topic is coming from. So in the ultra processed foods, allow me give the definition. These ultra processed foods, these are foods that are industrial, manufactured with formulations, and basically they are packed, and in these packings they add some other additives in them. These additives majorly are to give them to elongate on how they are going to be stored before us the consumers are going to use them. The other thing is also they add them with more additives, more chemicals, salts, sugars. Basically, these ones are to improve on their taste, texture, and some other things like the mouthfeel after consumption.
Okay, thank you so very much, Jonathan. So someone might ask themselves, what makes the food ultra and what makes it, like, how can someone know that this food is ultra processed? Like, what is done to the food that makes them ultra processed?
Thank you. The reason why they are called ultra foods, this is because these foods, original food that is got from the garden, is going to be broken down into smaller particles. Let us say, for example, we get our cassava from the garden. We shall break this cassava into its monomer units. For example, we are going to extract starch from it, and in this starch we shall go and add in some other additives on this starch so that we come up with something that is formulated in the factory. An example, let me give an example of bread. This bread we normally eat. We know very well that bread comes from wheat. So our wheat is an unprocessed product that is from the garden. After this wheat is going to be grinded or crushed to give us the flour. So this flour is going to be mixed with salts, butter, yeast, so that we come up with what we call dough. So this dough is later going to be taken in the oven, heated, it expands, and then we come up with bread. Now this bread is going to be packed in a polythene. In this polythene, there is what we call preservatives. These preservatives are the ones that are going to make this bread have a longer shelf life, and at the end of it all, it is manufactured. They added in some other things that were not initially in our wheat, making it ultra processed.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. So someone might ask themselves, how do these foods, like why should I care about ultra processed foods? How do these foods affect my lifestyle? How do they even affect my health or nutrition? So Mr. Jonathan is going to tell us more about that.
Yeah, once again, from my explanation why they are called ultra, these foods are broken down into their monomer units. Now, in the process of breaking them out, what are these scientists normally aiming at? To make them soft, white, and in the process of making them soft, fiber is going to be removed, what we know as fiber. And this fiber is of two types. We have the soluble fiber and the insoluble fiber. So this fiber is important. How is this fiber important? First of all, the soluble fiber is going to dissolve in the water in the body. When you consume a fruit, for example, mango, the fiber in the mango is consumed, or oranges they are consumed. Now, in these fibers, I said what is soluble and insoluble. The soluble part of it is going to dissolve in the water, and this water will form a heavy mixture, something like a gel. So this gel most times contains the glucose in the body that we need. So this gel most times is thick. So, and we know very well, the thicker the substance is, the lower the rate of diffusion. So that means absorption of glucose in our bloodstreams is going to be lower. The other part, which is insoluble, most times is eliminated as waste. So why is this insoluble fiber also important? This insoluble fiber goes through the gut, that is from the stomach to the small intestine to the large intestine. Now, in that process, as it is moving, it is cleaning our intestines, which is something very good. Now, what is important here, what I want us to note, these insoluble, this fiber, I said that the insoluble part becomes thick. This helps in regulating the absorption of sugar into the bloodstreams. Why is it important? If they are not regulated, it leads to type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, this is the most common diabetes in human beings, where the body either fails to produce insulin or produces enough insulin. Now, these days someone can be there wondering, why are even young children having that problem of diabetes? It's because of one, the main reason is because of these ultra processed foods. Remember, I said the fibers are removed. So once the fibers are removed that help in regulating absorption of sugar into the bloodstreams, they are removed, so you are consuming something that doesn't have fiber. That means sugars are going to be absorbed rapidly into the bloodstreams. And once they are absorbed rapidly into the bloodstreams, that increases the levels of of glucose in the body. Once the levels of glucose are produced in the body, and this side, the pancreas is doing its best to produce insulin, but the insulin is not enough, that leads to what? Diabetes. The other thing also, these ultra processed foods have a problem. They somehow affect our brain. How do they affect our brain? This is something we call hyperpalatability. In that, since the fibers have been removed from the food, so they are going to be absorbed at a very fast rate. The sugars, the fats are consumed at a very fast rate in our body. So some of the hormones in our body are going to be produced. The best example I can give is dopamine. Once this dopamine is produced in the body, this leads to failure of the body to recognize some signals, like the fullness signals. Once these signals are bypassed, like the body, the dopamine can no longer the dopamine can no longer regulate the sweetness, how something is sweet in the body. That will lead to addiction. That affects lifestyle. Addiction comes in whereby you eat something, you feel like it is sweet, you go back for it again and again. Now, as you are going back again and again on these ultra processed foods, remember they have what we call fats, sugar, salts, chemicals that some of us are not familiar with. Once they accumulate in your body, let me be specific with the fats. Once the fats accumulate in your body, they are going to block the arteries. Once the arteries are blocked, that leads to what? The high pressure. So that's why you hear some people having pressure at a very young age. That is because they are consuming these things.
Thank you very much. So as an everyday person, how do I identify these ultra processed foods? Maybe when I've gone to a supermarket or maybe the market, should I just look at that orange on the soda, maybe like Fanta, or should I look at those mangoes on maybe Minute Maid? And like, can you go more into details about that?
Now, one of the easiest way to identify these fruits, these ultra processed foods, when you go to the supermarket, always focus on that label. There is always that section on the label where they put ingredients. Now, most of the times they will say, they will mention an ingredient. Let me say, for example, calcium propanoate, they give the grams. They will mention the fat content in that food. They mention the gram. They will mention the sugar. The sugar is in that group. The minerals that have been added. At some point, you even see some other ingredients that are not familiar with you. You have never heard of them. They have, at some point, some even have names. The normal person, let me say, the normal person cannot even mention. That one is an indicator that it is an ultra processed food, because they added something to the food that initially wasn't in our whole food. For example, we got our orange. Let me give an example of our orange. Our orange, initially when you get an orange from a tree, nothing is in that orange. But when this orange is processed into orange soda, there are many things that are added. They are going to add preservatives. The most common preservative is carbon dioxide. So that is enough to tell you that what it is basing on the label, the ingredient section. That is enough to tell you that it is an ultra processed food.
Okay. So what do you have to say about the color?
Now, the color, most of the times, let me give an example of wheat. You know wheat? When wheat is crushed to give us flour, wheat is white, not so? So this wheat is going to be, they are going to add some other things. They will add yeast in it, they will add salts in it, they will add butter in it. From there, they make what we call dough. When this dough is made, it is taken in the ovens and it is heated at some temperature. This will lead to change in the color of our original product, which was white to brown. That is enough to tell you that that food has been processed. It is an ultra processed food. Another example I can give, let me give an example of, still let me use oranges. I believe all of us have noticed this, have seen this. When you get orange and you try to get juice from it, initially the color is not that orange you see, let me say in a bottle of Mirinda orange. Initially the color is not that. So what they do in these factories, they add colors. Specifically, they're going to add orange color. So that is enough to tell you that this food has been processed. The other thing, I will still use the orange. That orange you are seeing, well, at first it is not sweet when you get it because there are some acids produced in that orange. But when they take it in the factory, they add in sweeteners to make the orange soda what? Very sweet. That's why at some point you see some people say, "Yeah, I prefer orange soda." Why? It is sweet. At the end of the day, it becomes addictive. So color, basically, those colors are just added there, and I think these are things we normally do in our day-to-day life. When you get your juice, you know that orange juice most of the times, normally it is not that orange you see on a bottle of maybe Mirinda orange or we have orange, basically. So we have to base on that.
So as a person who is maybe already addicted to the ultra processed foods, how would you advise me to reduce the intake of those foods?
Now that we have known the impacts of this food, we know what they are capable of causing. First of all, we say they are capable of causing diabetes. They are capable of causing they will cause obesity because of the fats, overaccumulation of the fats, pressure, also heart diseases. Now, since we know that they cause that, how can we work on reducing these risks? One, the best thing you can do is eat cooked food. Food you have cooked for yourself. First, that helps in reducing that avoids addition of these very many chemicals, the sweeteners, the emulsifiers that lead to the dangerous sides of these ultra processed foods. The other thing, you should eat whole foods. When I say whole foods, I mean these vegetables. I mean the fruits we eat and vegetables we eat. For example, mango. Get used to eating those mango, those oranges. Basically, that is how you can reduce it. But the most point, what you should not most is you should eat cooked foods and whole foods. That will help you reduce on their consumption. But I'm not saying that you should eliminate eating them, because at some point they make life easy. Let me say, for example, someone from work is very tired, buy it and eat it. It makes your life somehow easy. But you should reduce the consumption by doing what I've told you, eating whole foods and whole foods. That will help reduce on the risks of this food.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Jonathan, for your time and for the information. I think most of us have learned. And there is one thing I would like to tell us about. It's mainly about Minute Maid. It's also in that part of ultra processed foods. Like you will get lied to that thick texture of the Minute Maid is actually mango. But honestly, it's just thickeners and sweeteners and everything. Like if you check on those food labels, make it a habit to check on those food labels. By the way, if you check on those food labels, you'll find that the sodium content of that Minute Maid is actually very high, like times very many times the normal sodium a normal person is supposed to, like the times very many times the normal sodium content someone is supposed to take in a day. And that sodium, by the way, can even be got from foods, not just, like you will realize that Minute Maid is mostly harmful. And there is that one mistake that most people have been doing, which is buying Minute Maid for the sick people. Like, okay, that accumulation of that sodium is really not good for our health. Remember, food can either kill, it can prevent, and it can also heal. So let's be mindful of our health. Thank you very much for watching Elevate Voice TV, amplifying voices, inspiring the world. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube channels, TikTok, X, Twitter, and everything. Thank you very much again for your time. Bye.